This is part 2 of my Panic at the Disco documentary. If you haven't seen part 1, I would advise you go check out that first. The link to that's going to be in the description. Let's get to the video. The departure of Ryan and John from the band sent Panic's fanbase into an uproar. Many people thought that this would be the end of the band, so Spencer and Brendon had to do damage control and fast. They made a post on the band's website confirming that Ryan and John were leaving, but that the band was alive and well and new music and tour dates would still be moving forward as planned. With half of the band now gone, Brendon and Spencer really started to have a new perspective on things. No, literally, they released a new song days after the split called New Perspective, which appeared on the Jennifer's Body movie soundtrack. This song was a bit of a throwback to the sound of A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, and is really where the band started developing more of their modern sound we've come to know from later albums such as Death of a Bachelor. Along with the new song, Panic got the opportunity to play support for one of the biggest bands in the world, Blink-182, on their 2009 reunion tour. This was the first time that Blink had gone on tour in over 4 years, and they were also joined by some other notable names in the scene, like Weezer and Fall Out Boy. Needless to say, this was a pretty big tour, and Panic did not want to miss out. Although they had one problem, they only had about a month and a half to find 2 new members to replace Ryan and John. After a few weeks of holding auditions, they finally settled on 3 new members to the band. The first was their new touring guitarist Ian Crawford, who had previously played guitar in a band called The Cab, who Panic were label mates with. The second is everyone's favorite, or least favorite touring member. I don't know how, but they found him, Dallon Weeks. Dallon had previously been the lead singer and bassist in a band called the Brobecks. It actually showed up to the Panic audition without knowing the songs.
So he didn't learn the songs. We're like, alright, well, go home, learn the songs, then come back, and then we'll play the songs to audition you to be in the band. And I was so annoyed at them. I was like, really? Alright, well, whatever.
And the third and final new member of the band, drumroll please, was the exclamation point. Yes, they finally added it back to the name. With their new and complete lineup, the band went on tour with Blink in August, and closed out the rest of 2009 playing a variety of festivals across the US and South America. Throughout 2010, the band spent most of the year working on their third album, Vices and Virtues. Writing for this album took much longer than the previous 2. With half of the band's members gone, including Ryan, who was the primary lyricist, it put much more responsibility on the shoulders of Brendon and Spencer. Although with less people to give opinions, they did find it easier to settle on a final idea.
We are super comfortable with each other, but it is different, when Ryan and John left, because we would all 4 of us write together. And it was easier because we had less opinions. It was just Spencer and I talking about it, so I'd come with a minute-long idea, and we'd say, oh, that's really cool, I think we can, it reminds me of this, so let's go in that direction.
After around 2 years of writing, the band finally sat down to record the album in mid-2010. They worked with 2 pretty legendary producers in the scene, John Feldman and Butch Walker, who combined have produced for all of these artists on screen right now. Although Brendon was initially nervous about working with new producers, he's spoken very fondly about his time working with Feldman and Walker.
John Feldman got us working, I'll say that. He is a workaholic. That dude does not stop. We show up at 11 in the morning, and we go till 1 in the morning the next day, which was good because we weren't really in that habit. We'd kind of just been really relaxed with our writing. Butch isn't, as movie shaky and getting everything going, but he more was kind of pushing for our ideas. We didn't have to struggle working with him at all, so he just pushed for our ideas, and it's really easy to communicate the sounds that we wanted for some reason.
2010 was also the year that Dallon Weeks would officially join the band as a full-time member. And although he didn't contribute musically to Vices and Virtues, he did sketch out what will become the final album art. It was even featured on the cover, although he's wearing a mask in the background. This would also begin the trend of Brendon being on every single album cover that the band would release. Leading up to the release of Vices, the band released the lead single off of the album, The Ballad of Mona Lisa. And began the first leg of their Vices and Virtues tour, playing intimate acoustic shows across the US. Towards the end of the first leg in March, Vices and Virtues was officially released. The album was reviewed fairly positively by critics, although it only sold 56,000 copies first week, less than half of what Pretty Odd did 3 years prior. Many fans also tend to see Vices as a fairly forgettable album, with really the only standout songs being Mona Lisa, Let's Kill Tonight, and one of my personal favorite Panic songs, Ready to Go. Overall, I think Vices and Virtues is extremely underrated and has a lot of really good deep cut songs. This wasn't the only music they released this year though. In May, they released a song called Come On, featuring the band Fun. Following this release, Fun would join Panic on the North American leg of their Vices and Virtues tour. This tour saw a return to form in a way, with Panic going back to the over-the-top stage production they were known for during the Fever era. They also released another live DVD, which they filmed once again in Chicago, and released in September exclusively on iTunes. For the rest of 2011 and halfway into 2012, they'd stay on tour pretty consistently, playing all across Europe, Asia, Australia, and North America. As their touring cycle ended in July of 2012, their touring guitarist Ian Crawford announced that he would be leaving the band in order to make, quote, real and genuine music. With the Vices touring cycle ended, the band stayed relatively quiet on the music front throughout the rest of the year, but 2013 would have some pretty big announcements that left fans very excited. In July, they announced that they had been working on their 4th studio album, Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, and gave it a release date for October. Along with this announcement, they also released the lead single for the album, Miss Jackson. For this album, they once again worked with producer Butch Walker, and Brendon and Dallon split lyrical duties. During the writing process, Brendon wanted to be much more personal and vulnerable in his lyrics, as well as write about his time growing up in Vegas.
Getting just raw and confessional. That's something that we've started doing a little bit more. The lyrics for Miss Jackson were inspired by something I actually went through, that I experienced and kind of had something done to me as well that made me see myself in a new light and felt differently about myself. But it helped me to move forward by writing the songs. That was kind of the side we wanted to touch on too, is like the Vegas that a lot of people who don't grow up there don't really know or haven't seen, driving from one place to another. When you're crossing over certain freeways you wouldn't if you were just, vacationing there. Being able to talk about that was kind of nice, kind of special for us, because we hadn't, like Spencer, we hadn't really talked about it directly.
They also tried some new sounds, with Brendon taking a lot of inspiration from hip-hop and pop.
But a lot of the production with synths and with making some electronic beats were inspired by hip-hop, a lot of it.
Along with the album announcement, they also announced a 4-month-long tour that included dates opening for Fall Out Boy during their Save Rock and Roll tour. Side note, Fall Out Boy, 21 Pilots, and Panic on the same tour is insane, and if you went to a date on that tour, I will forever be jealous of you. Anyway, with the new tours coming up, the band recruited a new touring guitarist in the form of Kenny Harris.
How did you get the gig? I moved out to LA and they were working on the record with Butch and Jake, and I just got a call and was like, hey, you wanna come meet my friend Brendon? So we just hung out once, and we were at Largo or something, seeing the music, and he was like, hey, you wanna do a thing? And I was like, yeah, I'll do a thing. And that was it.
Now you're doing that thing?
Yeah, now it was the easiest audition of all time, probably.
Everything was seemingly going great for the band on the outside, but behind the scenes, things weren't so perfect. On July 30th, just a week before beginning their new tour, Spencer posted an open letter to fans on the band's website, which I'll put on screen now. He explained that for the past 4.5 years, he had been battling drug and alcohol addiction. He explained that due to the stress of touring and the recent loss of a loved one, he had developed a dangerous dependency on prescription drugs that had only worsened over time. Luckily though, he was able to get the help that he needed and had recently found sobriety. However, with the upcoming tour, there was a worry for him about the temptations of alcohol and drug usage on the road.
I can't know every situation that I'm gonna be in. I'm gonna be in hotel rooms where there's, just whatever, alcohol readily available.
Sadly, these temptations would become too much for him, with Brendon posting a message stating, "It's become evident that Spencer still needs more time to take care of himself. I can't expect him to be fighting addiction one minute and be fully immersed in a national tour the next. With that said, the tour will continue without Spencer while he's away getting the help he needs. Thank you for all your support and kind words." With Spencer on an indefinite hiatus, Panic recruited their drum tech Dan Palovich to fill in as their touring drummer.
I started out as a tech, which it lasted for about a week, and then I moved up and started playing drums and continued to tech for myself.
While on tour, the band continued to release singles leading up to their new album, the biggest of which being This Is Gospel, released in late August. This was a very important song for Brendon, as he actually wrote it about Spencer's addiction.
It was really personal. It was about my buddy Spencer, who's a member of the band, who wanted, it was hard to convince him to be that honest, but it was about him battling his addiction.
Out of the singles released, it was also the most successful commercially by a landslide. This song was everywhere at the time on radio stations, and it even went 2 times platinum. The third and final single leading up to the album, Girls, Girls, Boys, was actually released on the same day as the album. It was written oddly enough about Brendon's first experience with the threesome. But fans have given the song a new meaning, about being free to love whoever you want no matter what. Panic's 4th studio album, Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, was officially released on October 8th. This album performed marginally better than Vices and Virtues, selling 84,000 copies first week and debuting at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 200. It received mostly positive reviews from critics, and many fans consider this a classic in their discography. All 3 singles are staples in the band's discography, and many of the deeper cuts are highly enjoyable as well, such as the song Nicotine, and Casual Affair. In my opinion, this is one of the most important albums that Panic have ever released. After the loss of Ryan and John back in 2009, many people had doubts that the band would ever get back to the success they once had, or if they'd even continue at all. I think that this was the album that really proved everyone wrong and solidified Panic's place as one of the greats in the genre, and the successes would just keep coming. Going into 2014, they played a series of nearly sold-out headlining tours, including the Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die US tour in January and February, a European tour in April and May, and the Gospel tour in July and August, along with a series of festivals all through the summer. These tours were also the first time that the band would begin covering the legendary song Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. Since then, the cover has become a staple in almost all of their live shows, and many vocal coaches have praised Brendon for how well he can perform the song. Vocal coaches weren't the only people impressed by Brendon's vocals, as this is also the year that he would win the award for Best Vocalist at the first ever Alternative Press Music Awards.
This is really crazy. The first Scully, this is so insane, right? Woo!
With such a busy year, the band decided to take some time off after touring to begin working on their next project. After playing a few festivals in the start of 2015, Brendon sat down to record the band's 5th studio album, Death of a Bachelor, in April. Now you may have noticed that I said only Brendon and not the rest of the band. That's because this is the first album that Brendon recorded entirely by himself. It was around this time that Panic at the Disco truly would become a solo project, with Spencer officially leaving the band in April, as well as Dallon being promoted back to a touring member in October, leaving Brendon as the only remaining member in the band. This meant that he recorded and played all the instrumental and vocal parts in the album, which for some would have been way too much pressure and responsibility, but for him, being able to have sole creative freedom was kind of what he wanted all along.
To be completely honest, it's very liberating. It's so different, when you're working with 3 other people. There's a lot of compromise. It's almost like you're married to these people because you're with each other every day. You know how to push each other's buttons. What ideas you want, what you don't want. There's a lot of compromise that happens, and this time around, not a lot of compromise. I was able to do exactly what I wanted. My vision was realized perfectly, and it just made me so excited.
The majority of the writing and recording of this album would take place at Brendon's home, where he had recently built his own studio. For this record, Brendon mostly wrote about his current life being married and how it changed from when he was single, hence the album title, Death of a Bachelor.
This whole album was written at my house where she and I live, and it reflects very much, the lifestyle that I was living, which is so different from who I used to be.
He also took a lot of heavy influences from Frank Sinatra and talked about the inspiration from him in multiple interviews. On the production side of things, Brendon decided to work with producer Jake Sinclair, who had previously done the engineering for their previous album, and also just finished production on American Beauty, American Psycho by Fall Out Boy. The first single for Death of a Bachelor, Hallelujah, was released shortly after production of the album started on the 20th of April. It was followed by 3 more singles throughout the year, Victorious in September, One of my favorite songs, Emperor's New Clothes, at the end of October, and arguably the biggest song on the album, and probably my favorite Panic song of all time, the title track, Death of a Bachelor, on December 9th. After playing festivals all throughout 2015 to promote the album, Death of a Bachelor was officially released on January 15, 2016. This is Panic's most commercially successful album to date, charting at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, beating out other acts such as Adele and even David Bowie, and selling 190,000 units first week, and eventually being certified double platinum. It was even nominated for a Grammy for Best Rock Album in 2017, but lost out to Cage the Elephant's album, Tell Me I'm Pretty. In my opinion, Death of a Bachelor is Panic's best album. There are no bad songs on here, and even deep cuts like Golden Days really stand out. Even recently, the album has continued gaining success, with the song House of Memories becoming a huge TikTok trend a few months back, and propelling the song to becoming one of their most streamed on Spotify and the biggest off of the album. With such a successful album release, the band went on some pretty massive tours in the following year, but not before adding a few new members to their touring lineup. This included Chris Bautista on trumpet, Navarro on trombone, and Jesse Malloy on saxophone. The band began their touring cycle playing a series of shows at universities for some reason. Yeah, I'm not sure either, but they played a whole lot of them in April, everywhere from Purdue to York College to the University of Alabama. If you go to the University of Alabama, comment below, because I've never met anyone from there. After playing these shows and headlining a few festivals, the band went on a summer headlining tour with the one and only Weezer, which was a pretty big deal for Brendon at the time.
We had kind of joked about it in the past, like, oh yeah, wouldn't it be great to tour with my idols, my heroes, musically speaking? It'd be so crazy. I like to think of it as opening. I mean, I'm opening for Weezer. We can technically call it a co-headline, but it's Weezer.
Along with this, they also did a European headline tour in November. Their biggest tour yet, though, would come in 2017. Shortly after finishing an Australian tour in January, the band went on their Death of a Bachelor US tour, a 36-date arena headlining tour that took place from February to April. This tour was absolutely huge for the band, being the first arena tour they'd ever done in the US. This was also the first time that they got to play at the legendary Madison Square Garden Arena in New York, something that was on Brendon's bucket list.
Especially excited about a certain spot or
Oh yeah, I'm excited for Madison Square Garden. We have only played the theater, and this is going to be our first headline at MSG, so holy crap, you guys.
That's insane. That's
So
insane.
cool. So cool. I'm so
Yeah.
excited.
Along with this, the band would also record their 4th live DVD on this tour, which was released on December 15th and filmed in Orlando, Florida. This was the band's last tour of the year, and unfortunately the final one that would include bassist Dallon Weeks. On December 27th, Dallon made an Instagram post stating, "For the last 8 years, I've had the incredible opportunity to perform in Panic at the Disco. While I'm sad to announce that my time with Panic has come to an end, I'm excited to continue making music with my new project, I Don't Know How But They Found Me. I'm grateful for the chance I've had to be part of Panic at the Disco for nearly a decade, and I will always consider myself indebted to those who made me feel welcome to be a part of Panic at the Disco. You changed my life, thank you all." After the Death of a Bachelor touring cycle, Brendon would take a brief step away from Panic to pursue his passions on Broadway. In May, he went on a 10-week tour with the Tony Award-winning play Kinky Boots, where he starred in the lead role. In interviews, Brendon has spoken very fondly of his time in the role, but cites it as one of the toughest things that he's ever done.
You mentioned you done Broadway, you did Kinky Boots here.
Yeah.
What was that experience like as opposed to being a rock star?
Oh man, Broadway is a totally different kind of monster. It's so demanding, 8 shows a week in 6 days. You've got 2 days where you do 2 shows a day. It's grueling. The acting, the singing. It's one of the hardest gigs I've ever had to do, and I'm so glad I did it.
After being home from that tour, Brendon spent the rest of the year taking some time off, as well as writing new music. One of these songs was a Christmas song, released on their YouTube channel at the end of 2017, called Feels Like Christmas.
Now it feels like Christmas, nearly every day it's like Christmas, with like children playing on Christmas.
The rest of the songs, and a subsequent new album, would begin to be hinted at the start of 2018 when fans received water bottles in the mail shipped from Brendon's P.O. box that had the words "Pray for the Wicked, 321 Unholy Water," as well as a video being posted to Panic's Instagram of Brendon brushing his teeth with an alarm clock that was stuck at 3:19. Many speculated that 3:19 and 3:21 were actually important dates for an upcoming album, and they'd be correct. On March 19th, the band would host a surprise pop-up show at a small venue in Cleveland, Ohio, where they'd unveil their new touring bassist, Nicole Rowe, the first ever female member of Panic. And on March 21st, they officially announced their 6th album, Pray for the Wicked, as well as releasing 2 new songs from the album, Say Amen Saturday Night, and F*** a Silver Lining. For Pray for the Wicked, the band once again worked with producer Jake Sinclair. Sonically on this record, Brendon was heavily inspired by his time on Broadway, and many of the songs have a very theatrical sound to them. In terms of writing, Brendon took a lot of inspiration from his religious upbringing on the album. It talks about how even though he isn't religious now, he still prays for causes he cares about.
I wanted to write something that touched on how I grew up. My tradition was I grew up in the Mormon faith, so even though I'm not religious now, I still pray, and I still feel spirituality, so I wanted to portray that in a way that wasn't necessarily like a dig at anybody. But yeah, that was just my way of saying, hey, I still can worship and praise. It doesn't matter if I'm a part of this religion or that religion. I still pray for the things I want to see, the change in the world and the love that I feel. So,
leading up to the release of the new album, the band would release their second single, High Hopes, on May 23rd. Now, if you know anything about Panic or listen to the radio at all in 2018 and 2019, you will know that this song went absolutely nuclear. After its release, it peaked at number 4 in the Billboard Hot 100, beating out I Write Sins Not Tragedies as their highest charting song. As of making this video, it's also hit over 1 billion streams on Spotify, gone 5 times platinum, and won multiple awards, including Top Rock Song at the Billboard Music Awards and Best Rock Video at the MTV Video Music Awards. Needless to say, this song absolutely propelled the band into even more of a household name than they already were, and basically solidified Brendon as a pop star. The success of High Hopes would garner even more hype for the album, and after one final single called King of the Clouds, the band officially released Pray for the Wicked on June 22nd. It sold 180,000 copies first week and debuted at number 1 once again on the Billboard Hot 200, much like Death of a Bachelor had before. The album was reviewed very well by critics, with many praising the new theatrical sound that Brendon was going for. The fan reception at the time was also extremely positive, although in recent times the album hasn't been seen in the most favorable light for reasons that I'll get into later. Obviously, there are many people who criticize the more heavy-driven pop direction that the album went in, but the majority of people really embrace the new sounds. Now, in my opinion, I think the album's pretty good. High Hopes and Hey Look Ma, I Made It are the 2 biggest songs on the album, and for good reason. The choruses in each are extremely catchy, and I find them getting stuck in my head constantly. Another standout for me is the closing track, Dying in LA, a slow song about feeling lost while you chase your dreams in Los Angeles.
But nobody knows you know when you're dying in LA.
Other than that, my main complaint about the album is that a lot of the tracks tend to blend together for me, and it can start to feel like one 34-minute long song, but overall, this is one of the better albums they released. With the success of the album, the band announced the Pray for the Wicked World Tour with dates all across North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. For this tour though, the band wanted to give back to people who really needed it, and on June 28th, they started the Highest Hopes Foundation, which I'll let Brendon explain.
I started it basically to fight for human rights. That's what I believe, and we have been funding Glisten's mission to help kids create an environment that is safe at schools, communities for LGBTQ youth, and it's more inclusive. Rather than shunning and shaming people, we'd like to include everyone, so thank you to Glisten for letting us be a part of that.
The band also announced that for every ticket sold during the Pray for the Wicked tour, they would donate $1 to the foundation. The band started touring in the US in July, and they stayed on the road pretty consistently until the end of August, when they played Reading and Leeds Festival in the UK. During September, the band got the month off in preparation for an Australian and Asian tour in October, but unfortunately, during this break, some pretty bad news would come out about one of the band's touring members. On September 20th, a thread was posted on Twitter detailing allegations of sexual misconduct against touring guitarist Kenny Harris. In the thread, she alleges that when she was only 16, Kenny messaged her asking for nude photos in exchange for a guitar pick in an upcoming concert. In response to the thread, multiple other screenshots and stories were shared by other girls, alleging that the same thing had happened to them. Shortly after the allegations were made, Panic made a statement on their official Twitter that read, "Touring guitarist Kenny Harris will no longer be performing with us because of a personal matter," and he was subsequently fired from the band. With their upcoming Australian tour coming up in less than a month, the band had to find a replacement and fast. This role would end up being filled by Mike Nairn, who had formerly played for other bands in the pop punk scene, like Breathe Carolina, Against the Current, and The Ready Set. With their touring lineup filled once again, the band went on their Australian and Asian legs of the Pray for the Wicked tour in October. After returning home, they would take a break from touring for the rest of the year to work on some new music. In November, they released their rendition of The Greatest Show, which featured on the Greatest Showman Reimagined compilation album. Brendon would also do a solo feature on the song Roses with Benny Blanco and Juice WRLD in December.
Roses are red, violets are blue, my heart is dead, I'm such a fool.
Roses would end up going 2 times platinum and continued to help solidify Brendon as a household name and one of the biggest pop stars of the time. Going into 2019, the band continued praying for the wicked all across America and Europe up until April, when their touring cycle basically ended, minus a few festival dates spread across the rest of the year. Actually, their performance on October 3rd in Rio would be the last time that the band would perform for 3 years, for reasons I'll get into soon. Overall, 2019 was a pretty uneventful year for the band. Brendon would still continue collaborating with big name artists, featuring on Taylor Swift's song Me in April.
I know I tend to make it about me, I know you never get just what you see.
Along with this, the band would also contribute a cover of Into the Unknown for the soundtrack of Frozen 2, where Brendon hits an absolutely insane high note that shows just how good of a singer he is on a technical level.
Into the unknown.
It definitely seemed like at this point in 2019, the band was at the peak of their success. With such a wildly successful tour, a #1 song, and multiple #1 albums under their belt, and multiple high-profile collaborations. But unfortunately, everything comes to an end, and boy did things go downhill fast for Panic, and more specifically Brendon, beginning in 2020. Quick disclaimer, anything said in this next section of the video is an allegation unless explicitly stated as true, and should be treated as such, an allegation. Thank you. Everything started going downhill in July of 2020 when former bassist Dallon Weeks replied to a Q&A question on Instagram saying that Panic's longtime security guard and close friend of the band, Zack was the worst person he's ever met. Now I know I haven't mentioned Zack yet, but he had been with the band since they first started and is a very close friend of Brendon. Although he was originally just hired as a security guard, throughout the years he had taken on so many more roles for the band, including things that would normally be dealt with by management. Because of this, he became very well known by the Panic community and was almost as recognizable as the band members themselves. Anyways, this comment by Dallon sparked a bigger discussion among fans about Zack's behavior over the years and if he was a part of why Dallon left the band. Many younger female fans began tweeting about their negative experiences they had with Zack over the years, including sexual comments that were aimed at them about their bodies when they were underage. One of these tweets ended up getting replied to by Breezy Weeks, Dallon's wife, who alleged that she had also put up with years of sexual harassment by Zack, but felt pressured to stay silent so that Dallon could keep his job in the band. This was followed by a tweet of her own, alleging that once during an outing with the band, Zack had made unwanted sexual advances toward her even with Dallon present, as well as a screenshot of him taking one of her Instagram photos, cropping it to show her cleavage, and making it his home screen. After this, Twitter erupted into an absolute firestorm, with people posting previous tweets Zack made being misogynistic, creepy, and overall just a horrible person. I'll put up most of these tweets here, pause the video if you want to read them in detail. Just warning, they can get very graphic, so look at your own risk. With all these allegations made, #FireZackHall began trending on Twitter, with fans tweeting at Brendon hoping that he would condemn Zack's actions and remove him from the band. Well, that's not what happened. For the next few months, Brendon and the Panic band stayed completely silent on social media, causing many fans to begin questioning Brendon and asking if his vow to create an all-inclusive community was really true. Things weren't helped by allegations, which were later proved false, coming out from an anonymous Twitter account about Brendon groping fans. fans. Like I said, keep in mind these allegations have since been proven false, but at the time they were picked up and spread around as fact, further damaging his reputation. People also began looking into Brendon's past because of this, and uncovering a lot of regrettable things he said and done, including rapping the N-word in a song.
Double up what you need, we got weed. You know what's up of the mother, my we chills for real.
Saying a transphobic slur, which he apologized for, and making this comment at a show which has aged horribly.
If I see you after the show, I'm gonna you. And I don't care if you want it. I more care if you don't want it. Because then I really want it. Dude. I really want it, bro.
After all of this was brought up, the band was once again trending for the wrong reasons, with hashtag BrendonSpeakUp trending on Twitter. He would eventually address these concerns in a live stream made in November. Now, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but if you're interested in watching it, you can find it on YouTube. But to sum it up, he explained that Zack was removed from Panic's team, although he would still remain friends with him due to believing in second chances. Brendon also acknowledged the sexual harassment claims brought against himself and vowed to grow as a person in the future, as well as denying the claims. Unfortunately for Brendon, his apology was not accepted by most people, and he would go radio silent across social media, with Panic's official account only posting about once a month and getting comment section full of hate on every post. This continued all throughout 2020 and 2021, and many wondered if this was the end for the band. And most people seemed happy to let him go. However, they were not over, and in 2022, they'd surprise release their first song in 3 years. On June 1st, the band released the song Viva Las Vengeance, along with the announcement of a new album of the same name. On its release, the song was praised heavily by many for how good Brendon's vocals sound on it, which I 100% agree with. But unfortunately, people still hadn't forgotten about the band's previous controversies back in 2020, and the song got a whole lot of hate comments, especially on Twitter. This was not helped by the release of their second single, Middle of a Breakup, which was also heavily criticized for its very lackluster lyrics, which I can't exactly blame people for. The other two singles were released soon after, Don't Let the Light Go Out,
Don't let the light go out. Don't let the light go out.
and Local God.
Local God, you'll live forever as a local God. It's even better than the thing you're not. Local God.
In my opinion, both of these songs are fine. I don't know, I'm not really a fan of this album. Brendon once again wanted to write a record about growing up in Vegas, which if I don't recall, he already did 9 years ago with a much better album. Anyway, this is most apparent on Local God, where he has some choice lyrics that many think are aimed at Ryan Ross, which Brendon's never outright commented on, so who can say. On the production side of things, Brendon once again worked with longtime producer Jake Sinclair, as well as Mike Viola, who was a huge inspiration to Brendon growing up. Mike is actually part of the reason why Brendon decided to record Viva Las Vengeance directly to an 8-track tape machine.
Yeah, I mean, we did this whole record on a tape machine. We wanted to go back
on an
in time
8-track?
on an 8-track tape machine, a little Atari, if you really want to know. It's awesome. It's just really fun to get back to the roots.
Finally, on August 19th, Panic released their 7th studio album, Viva Las Vengeance. Like I said before, this album really isn't it for me. It's very inspired by Queen, and when I say very inspired, I mean very inspired, and that type of music just isn't really my favorite. That's not to say that there aren't good songs on here though. One of my personal favorites being Say It Louder. Critically, the album was reviewed fairly well, but commercially this was a flop, only peaking at 13 on the Billboard Hot 200. It was also bashed pretty hard on social media, partially due to the controversies Brendon and the band had faced back in 2020. Shortly after the album's release, the band went on the Viva Las Vengeance arena tour across the US, which they just finished as of recording this video, and they're set to begin the European leg of their tour in February of 2023. Where will Panic go from here? Will they ever earn back the positive reputation they once had? I guess we'll see. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Also remember to check out my Patreon, linked in the description, if you'd like to further help out the channel. With that being said, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.